Right now on Hoosier News Source, we hear students' thoughts on the presidential election, and IUDM held their fundraiser virtually over the weekend.
And I have updates on this record-breaking hurricane season, as well as the IU football game day forecast. Hoosier News Source starts now.
Hello, and welcome to Hoosier News Source. I'm Sammy Nance. We start off this week's episode with the 2020 election. Hoosier News Source reporter Lizzie DeSantis joins us in studio with more on what the outcome could mean going forward. Lizzie?
Thanks, Sammy. Over the weekend, Joe Biden won the presidential election and secured votes in key swing states. I spoke with a political science professor about the results. Take a look.
The potential success of President-elect Biden's legislative agenda will become clearer with the results of the two runoff elections in Georgia that will determine partisan control of the Senate. However, political science professor Colin Fisk says Biden's approach to foreign policy will be largely unaffected by Senate majorities.
I know there have been, some strains between Western European countries and the United States while President Trump has been in office. So I think President Biden will make it clear to them that we are reaffirming our relationships with them, and we want to, start off on a good foot in 2021.
Fisk says that the Paris Climate Agreement will most likely also be on Biden's foreign policy agenda.
The United States will probably rejoin the Paris Climate Accords as an action showing that the Biden administration makes it clear that climate change is a serious issue and it's a pressing issue that we have to handle now.
The Biden administration will face a difficult challenge in seeking to repair national unity after a contentious election.
Despite losing, President Trump got a lot of support this election. This is, an election where we saw the highest turnout since like the early 1900s. When it's all said and done, probably close to 75 million people will have voted for President Trump, which is the second most all time, right? Second after, of course, Biden.
The image of a vice president who is a woman of color is a symbol that has potential to influence the country beyond the 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration, shaping what the next generation of the country's leaders look like.
While Biden is the president-elect, the electorates don't vote until December 14th. Sammy, back to you.
Thanks, Lizzie. CAPS held their first Election Expressions workshop this week to support students during the election season. The free workshops are set up as drop-in office hours to help students. CAPS wants to provide a safe space for students to access resources that can help them navigate this election cycle that's unlike any other. Counselors provide students with de-stressing and coping techniques that students can also use in other areas of their lives.
Something tricky was making sure that, everyone's allowed to have their own political views, but we have to, as CAPS professionals, make sure whoever comes in is going to feel supported and safe and secure.
The final two sessions are November 11th and November 18th, and the Zoom link is provided on the CAPS website. Last Tuesday's election had historic voter turnout, and we wanted to hear what students had to say about the results. Take a look.
I feel like I didn't really follow it that well because I couldn't vote because I'm not a citizen. But I feel like, especially the post-election, I feel like there's too much animosity, especially considering the fact we already know who's the president. I feel like a lot of arguments are being had over something that can't really be changed anymore.
I'm just hoping that we can get the situation all in order, like COVID and, the rights and all that.
Yeah, I was super excited, especially now that we have our first woman VP. I think that's super awesome, especially to have it be a woman of color.
Yeah, I'm just really relieved. I feel a lot less stressed about the future of our nation and our planet. So yeah.
Okay, I'm really happy that Biden won.
Not only did young voters have record turnout, Joe Biden broke the record for most votes in a presidential election with more than 74 million votes. And while the election results were coming in this weekend, IUDM celebrated its 30th annual dance marathon. Both COVID precautions, it looked a little different than usual. Hoosier News Source reporter Andrew Lamparski has more.
FTK! FTK!
30 years of IUDM, this time bringing in nearly $3 million for Riley Children's Hospital. For Senior and Marketing Director Hunter Haynes, it's all about hope.
Obviously, the total reveal, we are so happy to provide a set of hope and help to making those miracles happen for the hospital.
But this wasn't a typical last year for Hunter.
During a normal year, IUDM would be taking place here at the tennis center, but instead it took place here.
A full schedule of virtual events made up this year's marathon. The annual line dance, performances, speeches, all made their way to IUDM30.org.
As much as the marathon's virtual, we're still here, we're still present, and we're still doing and trying to do as much as we can possible to make that total reveal as happy as we can make it.
Luckily, it wasn't all 36 hours at a computer screen. Some smaller events took place around campus, like in Dunn Meadow. Sophomore Aiden Whitney says he was able to meet up with some friends from IUDM to celebrate together.
We still made the best of it, and we did our best to keep the same energy levels as we have been in the past years.
And although it might not have been the ideal IUDM, Haynes says this one will have a lasting legacy.
We were able to pull off a marathon that will be forever remembered as something very special.
For Hoosier News Source, I'm Andrew Lamparski.
For more on IUDM, be sure to tune into this week's What's Up Weekly, where we'll be sitting down with two of this year's dancers for an interview you won't want to miss. Coming up on Hoosier News Source, we find out how long COVID immunity actually lasts, and Caroline Clare joins us with this week's forecast. Welcome back to Hoosier News Source. Caroline Clare has the latest on this week's weather. Caroline?
Thanks, Sammy. This overactive hurricane season isn't over yet. As Hurricane Eta dissipates into the southern U.S., subtropical storm Theta develops in the Atlantic. This storm breaks the record for the most named storms in a single season. 2020 has named 29 storms so far, with a chance of a 30th developing later this week. Luckily, neither of these storms will be a threat to us here in Bloomington as the IU football team makes their way to Michigan on Saturday. If you plan on home gating this Saturday, it should be a relatively overcast day, starting in the morning at 45 degrees and cloudy, small chance of precipitation as we make our way through the day, but after the game around nighttime, precip chances will increase, so if you are driving after the game, make sure to be weather aware as roads may be slick. Also, this game is nationally televised on the ABC channel. Make sure to tune in there. Now, let's take a look at what to expect for the rest of the week. As you can see, a pretty uneventful week. Nice, sunny, and 50s, maybe even going into the 60s as we head into the weekend, and small chance of precipitation this weekend as well. Lows even reaching into the 30s, so if you are heading out the door, make sure to grab a jacket. Enjoy this week of cooler temperatures and make sure to tune in and cheer on the Hoosiers this weekend. Sammy, back to you.
Thanks, Caroline. Now we transition to the latest COVID-19 updates. Andrew Lamparski is on campus with new numbers released from the university. Andrew?
Thanks, Sammy. It's now the third week in a row that we've seen an increase in COVID-19 cases here at IU. For the first time since the beginning of March, IU Bloomington saw a positivity rate of more than 1%. Out of roughly 8,400 mitigation tests this week, 120 came back with positive results. Greek housing saw a significant jump, from 1.4% to 3.6% this week. Residence halls are up to 1.4% from 0.9% the week before. The only decrease is from off-campus students, from 1.2% to just 0.6%. And even though those numbers are going up, it didn't stop some big crowds right here on Kirkwood this weekend from celebrating IU's win against Michigan. Fans, many maskless, took to Kirkwood and Memorial Stadium after Saturday's game. This comes after a similar event took place 3 weeks ago after IU's win against Penn State. It's unclear whether these celebrations are or will be related to any future outbreaks. And just a reminder that we are officially in our last week of random mitigation testing before Thanksgiving. If you want to sign up to get a departure test next week, you can do that at covid.iu.edu. And that's all for this week's Campus COVID Update. For Hoosier News Source, I'm Andrew Lamparski. Sammy, back to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Isolation and quarantine are two words we've been hearing a lot for the past 7 months, but some may not know the difference between the two. The IU medical director says isolation is for those who have tested positive for the virus. Quarantine is for those who have been in contact with someone who tested positive. Whether you are in isolation or quarantine, it is important to stay away from others. For those who have the virus, they stay isolated for 10 days after the infection date, while those in quarantine must stay away from others for 14 days after the last exposure.
Most people just have to watch and wait for symptoms because they could have the virus and be asymptomatic, because that definitely happens in a large majority of people.
The IU Health Center team is always available to answer any further questions or concerns and can be found at healthcenter.indiana.edu. COVID has led to some big changes in communal housing this year. Hoosier News Source reporter Callie Lichter has more on 2 on-campus houses that are still facing quarantine restrictions. Callie?
That's right. It wasn't too long ago that the majority of houses on campus were on quarantine orders, and now just 2 are. On October 23rd, the Evans scholars were told that they had at least 4 positive cases in the house, leading them to be one of the final Greek life chapters to be sent to quarantine. With each new case, the quarantine gets reset, and many freshmen opted to quarantine at home. Freshman scholar Stephen Alton was one of them.
How I found out about quarantine is while we were at the house and we knew some cases were on the rise, we all received an email saying that we were officially under quarantine and couldn't go to work or classes, and we had the option to either stay or go home.
Other scholars chose to stay, like Evans Scholar President Philip Nowinski. Philip has provided some videos as to what a house under quarantine looks like.
As you can see, the hallways are empty. Oh, hi, Spencer. Right now I'm walking through the social halls. So you can see no one's really here or in the basement. These are pretty much off limits because of COVID and because of the quarantine. People can just use the rooms to go study. This is the study room where scholars come to study. So you can see Jacob is studying pretty hard.
As of November 10th, the house is no longer on a quarantine order and the majority of students are returning to the house. Sammy, back to you.
Thanks, Callie. Campus also saw some celebrations over the weekend when IU football defeated Michigan. IUSTV sports reporter Lexi Vanetti joins us with the latest on IU sports. Lexi?
Thanks, Sammy. 10th in the nation. IU football is ranked 10th in the coaches and AP top 25 poll. This historical team in the making beat Michigan 38-21 and broke their losing streak to the Wolverines for the first time in 24 years. The team's success is not due to luck. They dominated nearly every stat, and Penix delivered his second career 300-yard passing game with a career high of 342 yards. Hoosier fans celebrated on Kirkwood and Memorial Stadium again. Next week, they'll head to East Lansing to take on Michigan State.
Thanks, Lexi. And thank you for watching this week's episode of Hoosier News Source. To learn more about this week's stories, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at IUSTV News. I'm Sammy Nance. From Bloomington, Indiana. We'll see you next time.